Did you know Australia declared war on emus? And lost? Yes, you heard that right. An actual military campaign was launched against a mob of very large, very flightless birds. And the birds came out victorious. This wild and little-known chapter of history is known as the Great Emu War, and it's equal parts absurd and fascinating. So buckle up, you're not going to believe this story. The year was 1932, and it was a tough time for Australians. The Great Depression was wreaking havoc on livelihoods, particularly among farmers in Western Australia. These farmers were veterans of World War I who had been given land by the government as part of a soldier settlement scheme. But farming wasn't easy. A combination of tough economic conditions and a very dry climate had created a perfect storm of hardship. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Enter the emus. Picture a giant bird standing over 6 feet tall and weighing up to 130 pounds, with long, powerful legs and a knack for speedy travel. Emus are flightless, but they can sprint at roughly 50 kilometers per hour. They may look a little goofy with their floppy feathers and round bodies, but trust me, they are no joke. These formidable creatures had their own problems during 1932, as their natural habitat was facing drought conditions, forcing them to search for food elsewhere. And guess where they found a veritable buffet? Yep, the farms of Western Australia, where carefully cultivated fields of wheat stood as irresistible banquets. Soon, these avian invaders arrived by the thousands. Groups of hundreds, led by a dominant male, descended upon farmland like feathery pests of biblical proportions. Wheat crops were decimated, fences trampled. To add insult to injury, rabbits, another introduced species, often also made their way through the broken fences left in the emus' wake. The farmers were desperate and didn't know how to handle this new threat. That's when they turned to the government for help. Enter Major G.P.W. Meredith from the Australian military. A World War I veteran, Major Meredith was a capable soldier, equipped with experience and 2 Lewis guns, rapid-fire weapons used during the war. It's important to pause for a moment here and let the absurdity of this sink in. They were deploying machine guns against birds. Still, the plan must have seemed foolproof at the time. Kill the emus, save the farms, restore order. If only it had been that simple. The Great Emu War officially began in November of 1932. Meredith and his men set out into the farming regions of Western Australia, ready for battle, each armed with more than 10,000 rounds of ammunition. But the emus were not going to make it easy. From the very start, these birds proved themselves far more cunning than anyone had expected. In the first engagement, the army encountered a group of about 50 emus. They set up an ambush, lined up the machine guns, and fired. Feathers flew. Chaos ensued. But most of the emus simply ran for their lives at high speed, dispersing into small groups and making them incredibly hard to target. It was like playing a bizarre, giant version of whack-a-mole, with the birds popping up in different places but never standing still. Then came attempt number 2. Meredith and his men found a larger group of about 1,000 emus near a dam. Thinking this was their chance for redemption, they positioned their machine guns once again, aimed carefully, and let loose a barrage of gunfire. At first, it seemed to work. Some birds were taken down. But once again, the emus adapted. They scattered in all directions, moving so swiftly and in such unpredictable patterns that the soldiers couldn't track them effectively. Imagine how humiliating this must have been for a trained military unit, utterly outmaneuvered by birds. In one comical turn of events, the soldiers mounted a machine gun to a truck, hoping this would give them an edge. The idea was to chase down the emus in a high-speed pursuit, but the rugged terrain made driving difficult and, hilariously, the emus proved faster and more agile than the truck. In some cases, they even outran it. As you might expect, this campaign didn't last very long. In just about a month, Major Meredith and his men had fired around 2,500 bullets, and yet they had only managed to kill a few hundred emus. To make matters worse, stories of the failed campaign began circulating in the media, turning the Great Emu War into a public spectacle. Journalists mocked the government and the military, questioning how they could fail so spectacularly against a bunch of birds. Farmers were outraged because not only had the emus not been eradicated, but the campaign itself had been a waste of resources. By early December, the government decided to cut its losses and withdrew the troops. And so, the Great Emu War came to an end, leaving Australia with one of the most bizarre and embarrassing chapters in its military history. The emus, by all accounts, had won. Looking back, Major Meredith himself even commented on the resilience of the birds. He noted that they could endure several bullets without slowing down and compared them to tanks, feathered, biological tanks, if you will. Today, the Great Emu War remains a curious anecdote often retold to highlight the unpredictability of history. It's a story filled with humor, desperation, and a feather-laden lesson in humility for humankind. So the next time you see an emu, give it the respect it deserves. After all, its ancestors soundly defeated an armed military force. And who knows, maybe they're still waiting for round 2. Thank you for diving into this strange slice of history with me. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and follow for more historical hidden gems. Ensure the expanded voiceover is even more entertaining, but that it maintains the same style, tone, and key points as the original.